Should I do grind session?
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah.
So in 2000, I was playing this PS1 game called Grind Session. I was just getting my hands on any skateboarding games I could get. I was obviously on Tony Hawk's. Tony Hawk's 2 came out the same year. And everyone knows the Tony Hawk soundtrack. It's pretty influential. But I would argue that the Grind Session soundtrack's even better. And it's just, I was saying in my email to you guys, it's like the Tony Hawk soundtrack but for the connoisseur. It's like just a bit more edgy and a bit more obscure. So fully, like, this stuff blew my mind when I first heard it when I was 12, remember? And I actually didn't like it at all. I thought it was too aggressive, too dissonant and offensive, because you've got bands on there like Sonic Youth, Black Flag, NoFX, and I was just a bit too young for it. And obviously I love that sound now. And then you've got hip hop as well, but like really, really legit stuff like Jizza, Dr. Octagon, and KRS-One, and Jurassic 5 on there as well. And I struggled, to be honest. At first, it was too much for my tiny brain. But there's only 40 minutes worth of music, and if I sat and played the game for 3 hours a night, more, it's gonna get in there one way or another. And over time, I started to be like, the riffs kind of like started sinking in, and I started craving like more stuff like that. So for me to hear like it's got Rise Above on it, right? So for me to hear Rise Above by Black Flag, then that was a bit of a gateway drug for me to start exploring like other aggressive music, really. Also, I think it's a good moment to reflect on this album because people are talking more now about the crossover point where like hardcore and hip hop are sort of like getting back together again after spending some time apart. And there's a lot of bands who are like in both lanes as well, but it's always been the case. Especially in skateboarding culture, it's quite normal to love like multiple genres at once. And the main thing is like the driving force behind it, which is the pissed offness, passion, aggression, attitude. And I think it's got it all, really. And I just think it stands up really well as a great collection of tunes. It's like a playlist that I would actually stick on. The game was terrible. It was like unplayable compared to Tony Hawk's. It was really stiff and hard to play. I had a bit of a hookup for pirate video games, and I would just get dozens of new games a week. I would get every new game that came out and I'd play them all. So for some reason this one stuck with me. And I still played Tony Hawk's, got to know other bands through them. Obviously there's some iconic songs from those games as well. I remember AC/DC sticks out from the Tony Hawk soundtrack. Rage Against the Machine had a couple of tunes on there as well. And I suppose they're the ultimate crossover band when you're talking about punk, hardcore, metal and hip hop all getting mixed in together. So yeah, I wanted to throw you a bit of a curveball and not choose an album, choose a soundtrack. But it exists as a Spotify playlist if anyone wants to listen. The Grind Session soundtrack's on there. And like I was saying, you got Jizza, KRS-One, NoFX, Sonic Youth. It's pretty rad.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty rad. I'd not heard of Grind Session, had no idea it even existed. Obviously, like many people, grew up with Tony Hawk. And to be fair, I played Tony Hawk's on the PS1 a lot. And the only song that I could really remember off the top of my head being on that soundtrack was Goldfinger. Goldfinger Superman. So for whatever reason, that didn't really sink in all that much. But what I was delighted about when you sent me the playlist for this was that it opened up with a Dr. Octagon track, because I only got into Dr. Octagon fairly recently. Like he had an album out in 2018 called Moose Bumps, and I got really into that. So I was glad to see that he was on this. I'm also well into Jurassic 5. I've got a couple of their classic albums. Really loved Jurassic 5. And it's just, there's something about the hip hop of that era that I love. And even the stuff that I wasn't that au fait with sort of stuff from Jizza or some of the other things on here, or the KRS-One track, but there's just something about that music that really vibes with me. So I was well into that. And then obviously you've got the sort of bangers from NoFX, Black Flag and Sonic Youth, but I liked the that Television Fishing song as well, which
Man or
Astro Man, yeah. I was walking along with listening to that on my headphones, thinking that would be really fun to listen to while you're like grinding along I'm rating on Tony Hawk's or something. Like, so it does really, it sort of fits with the skateboarding game kind of thing. So
yeah, there's something like mesmerizing, introspective about playing a skateboarding game and just getting lost for hours in it. And then you need the right music to work with that, and I think that works really well.
Yeah, I think the last track in that playlist is that the Galaxy Express 69 mix is absolutely off the wall. Like,
is that the one that's like shoegazy, Spaceman 3 type?
But it's got some really like harsh, like static noises and stuff in it as well. But it's a really, really wild.
I want to know the person who put this soundtrack together, because it's really, some of it's really offensive. I can kind of see why the game flopped, but thank God it sort of helped form my taste. Did you manage to get hold of it, Grant?
I did, yeah. I really enjoyed it. Like, it was one of the first things out of the the collection albums that we were looking at that I listened to, and it got me quite excited because it is quite an eclectic mix. Obviously, huge fan of NoFX, Rise Above by the Black Flag. Really liked Empty Heart by Zen Gorilla as well. Had this kind of really dirty garage rock feel to it. And I've kind of written down here that the singer in this track sounds like the love child of Ian Curtis and Mick Jagger, which I thought was pretty cool. That Television Vision song as well, that really kind of stood out for me as well. Kind of proper kind of low-key banger. For my money, it kind of sounded like an old kind of B-movie kind of soundtrack. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the kind of hip hop stuff as well, which isn't normally within my wheelhouse. But yeah, I really enjoyed the first kind of couple of tracks. Particularly Out for Fame by KRS-One. I thought that was really
good.
Sick. I'll tell you what's quite funny to think about with this one is, you said it came out at the same time as Tony Hawk's 1, or around the same time.
Yeah.
And there was another one, Thrasher Skate and Destroy, that had quite a good soundtrack.
It was okay, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, and then obviously Tony Hawk had the fucking hugest songs you could ever dream of on there, because it's Tony Hawk, innit? And I guess like maybe this has got more obscure songs, not only because a cool person made it, but also you probably couldn't afford a Wu-Tang Clan song or the Big Jizza song, but they might have spunked all the money on Linoleum and Black Flag, and then gone like we have to pick album tracks. That must have been an element of that in there, I think, and that's probably why it's such a short soundtrack as well. Because if you think about Tony Hawk, getting AC/DC on the soundtrack must have cost him like thousands of quid. But then that's Tony Hawk, isn't it? So I think part of the eclecticness of this soundtrack is probably due to like trying to make it cool, but also working within a grind session budget. Tony Hawk Dreams on a grind session budget.
Yeah, it feels to me like that whoever picked these songs had quite a lot of creative control as well. They didn't have to get signed off by a lot of people. They just kind of said like, I'm in charge of the music. This is what I like. I'm just looking at the Thrasher soundtrack, and that was good. It had that Gang Starr.
And White Lines on it, didn't it? White Lines by Grandmaster Flash.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was actually fun.
That's the first time I heard White Lines by Grandmaster Flash.
Me too.
I fucking loved it.
It's funny to think that I was probably sitting in my bedroom and you were sitting in your bedroom a few miles away and we didn't know each other playing the same game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've not played Thrasher either. I do remember it. But I remember that one, but where the hell did Grind Session come from?
Like I say, I wouldn't have known about it if I didn't have all these, like this influx of pirate games just landing everywhere. But yeah, I don't know why. It was almost pointless to try and compete with the Tony Hawk games because they were just like better, so much better than everything else.
I do indeed and greed, explore, meet the patients, back the rooms with the nurse with the voodoo curse.
What up, Chino? Master Ace in the place with the bass.
Got the rhythm that makes your fingers snap, crackle, pop, pop, fizz, fizz. You don't care about, I don't care about you. We don't finish.
finished.